In this video, I'm going to recommend a strategy to help you manage your timing on the GMAT. To set this up, I'll first remind you of 4 important facts. First, your GMAT score is a reflection of not only your content knowledge, but also your time management skills. So if you have 700 level content knowledge and only 500 level time management skills, it's quite possible that your score will be closer to 500 than to 700. Second, the GMAT scoring algorithm punishes you severely for leaving any questions unanswered. Third, the scoring algorithm also punishes you for having several incorrect answers in a row. So it's better to have 6 incorrect answers spread throughout the test than it is to have 6 incorrect answers in a row. Fourth, the test makers have repeatedly stated that the scoring algorithm does not overly favor the results of the first 10 questions on each section. So there is no reason to spend more time on these questions than on any other questions. Okay, with all of these facts in mind, our goal is to develop a strategy that helps us maintain a good pace, helps us spread out any incorrect answers, and ultimately helps us avoid having too many questions and not enough time near the end. Now at the same time, we want to avoid finishing the test with too much time to spare. Because unless your skills are at the 800 level, you probably could have used that extra time to your advantage. In fact, in a perfect world, you'll start working on the last question with about 3 minutes remaining. No more, no less. Okay, the last consideration for an appropriate strategy is that we want to avoid looking up at the clock every 30 seconds and performing mental calculations to determine whether or not we're on track. For example, let's say that you just finished answering question number 15 and there are 36 minutes remaining. Are you on track? If you're behind, how many minutes behind are you? If it takes you more than 5 seconds to answer those questions, then you're wasting valuable time. Okay, so those are our goals, and here's a strategy to achieve them. First, at the very beginning of the test, we're going to spend about 15 seconds drawing 2 milestone charts on our noteboard. These 15 seconds will be time well spent. Now, the milestone chart for the quantitative section will look like this. On the left-hand column, we'll list the question numbers, and on the right-hand column, we'll list the time remaining. In the question number column, we'll start at 0, and we'll add markers for every 5 questions up to 30, since there are 31 math questions altogether. To complete the time remaining column, we'll begin with 62 minutes, because this is how much time you have for the math section, and we'll count down by 10 minutes for each entry. The verbal milestone chart is very similar. The only difference is that we need to number the questions from 0 to 35, and in the time remaining column, we'll begin with 65 minutes, and we decrease by 9 minutes for each interval. Now, for the purposes of this video, we'll examine how to use the quantitative milestone chart when completing the quantitative section of the test. The strategy is exactly the same when using the verbal milestone chart to complete the verbal section of the test. Okay, so now that you have your milestone charts, you're going to check them every 5 questions. No more, no less. This means that once you complete question number 5, you'll check the on-screen clock and compare the time you have remaining to the time indicated on your milestone chart. If you're on track, then you should have about 52 minutes remaining. So let's say that after completing question number 5, you check the on-screen clock and it reads 51:25. This is fine. If you're less than 2 minutes behind schedule or 2 minutes ahead of schedule, don't make any changes to what you're doing. At this point, just continue answering questions until you complete the 10th question. After completing the 10th question, compare the time you have remaining to the recommended time on your milestone chart. If you're on track, then you should have about 42 minutes remaining. So let's say you check the clock and it reads 39:31. This means you're about 2.5 minutes behind schedule. So at this point, you pretty much have 2 options. One option is to hope that you'll somehow make up those 2 minutes later in the test. This is a bad idea. First, it's quite possible that doing so will cause you some anxiety for the remainder of the test. Added to this, what happens if you don't make up that lost time? Even worse, what happens if you lose even more time? Well, in that case, you'll probably have to guess on several questions at the end of the test, and this will likely result in several incorrect answers in a row, which will hurt your score considerably. So here's what I recommend. If you're 2 minutes or more behind at one of the intervals, then your goal is to get back on track before the next time check. To do this, you'll have to guess on one of the next 5 questions. Now, the biggest advantage to the strategy is that by getting back on track quickly, you will reduce your anxiety, which will allow you to effectively handle the questions in front of you. Now, some students won't like the idea of guessing on any question. If you're one of those students, you should keep in mind that it's possible to answer several questions incorrectly and still score 800 on the GMAT. Also keep in mind that you still might guess correctly, or the question may be experimental, in which case an incorrect answer will not affect your score at all. More importantly, if you're 2 or more minutes behind, you'll likely end up guessing at some point anyway, so why not do so sooner than later, and in the process, relieve some of the anxiety that these time constraints can produce. For all of these reasons, guessing is preferable to trying to make up lost time. Okay, so let's say you've decided to make up those 2 minutes by guessing on one of the next 5 questions. At this point, you should be on the lookout for optimal guessing opportunities. Now, what are optimal guessing opportunities? Well, as you're preparing for the GMAT, you should be identifying any remaining weaknesses that you may have. For example, you may have a lot of difficulty answering probability questions, or perhaps distance, rate, time questions give you problems. If you've already had little or no success with certain question types, then these are excellent candidates for guessing, since you may not be able to answer these questions anyway, even if you did have 2 minutes to answer them. Now, for verbal questions, a great candidate for getting time back is guessing on a very long critical reasoning question. Another great candidate is a sentence correction question where the entire sentence is underlined. The main idea in all of this is that a quick guess means that the next time you check your milestone table, you will likely be back on track, which will help reduce your anxiety and give you more time to work on the remaining questions. Now, I'll admit that this is not the end-all beat-all timing strategy. Everyone has a different comfort level when it comes to dealing with time constraints and handling guessing. The important point in all of this is that you must have a timing strategy in place before test day. So if there are some aspects of this strategy that sound appealing, modify the strategy so that it fits your comfort level. Finally, once you have a strategy, be sure to practice it on several practice tests before test day. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks and good luck.